Stewart, and Outreach Director Mark Parazella. Secondly, I'd like to thank Dan Downs, who is the President of Students for Liberty at Lincoln Center. He helped us promote the event on Lincoln Center's campus. Third, I'd like to thank Mr. Larry West, who isn't in attendance today. Larry is the Project Manager of Our America Initiative, a 501c4 political advocacy committee started by Governor Johnson. And lastly, I would like to thank Governor Johnson himself, who agreed to speak tonight for no speaker's fee. And as a token of our appreciation, I would like, we ask you all to please donate. We have a donation box set on the front. Now, about the governor. Gary Johnson is a former two-term governor in New Mexico, where he served from 1994 to 2002. And he's also a likely 2012 presidential candidate. The governor has stood out for his libertarian ideals, such as desire to cut government spending, decriminalize marijuana, bring our troops home, and limit government intrusion into our lives. The governor did all this before it became a popular and Tea Party position. His successes as governor include eliminating an inherited budget deficit, something our former and current presidents certainly need a lesson on, presiding over the longest period without a tax increase in New Mexico's history, and being an early advocate of the school value system. Additionally, the governor is a man of principle. He vetoed 750 bills as governor, more than any other governor combined in all 49 states. In addition to these political accomplishments, Governor Johnson is a successful entrepreneur, an Ironman triathlete, and a conqueror of Mount Everest. So without further ado, the Young Americans for Liberty.
I really want to apologize for being late. My whole life is based on being on time, and I just go crazy when I'm not on time, so I'm sorry. Thanks. As was mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur, first and foremost. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974, my third year in college. And in 1994, I actually had 1,000 employees, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. I sold that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job, and business is doing better than ever. I really view my venture into politics as entrepreneurial. I've never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party a couple of weeks before I announced, and what they said was we like you, we like what you've got to say, but you need to know that you'll never get elected. It's not possible to come from completely outside of politics and get elected governor in a state that is 2-to-1 Democrat. Well, I got elected, and I think the significance of having gotten elected was that I did what I said I was going to do. Why did I get elected? Well, I just said that I was going to bring a common sense business approach to state government, that everything was going to be a cost-benefit analysis. What are we spending and what are we getting for our money? Issues first, politics last. I got elected. One of the things that I was known for as governor of New Mexico is I vetoed thousands. I had thousands of line item vetoes. I actually had 750 bills that I outright vetoed. Putting that into context, that was more than the other 49 governors in the country combined. And I think what was really significant about that was that the state was 2-to-1 Democrat. And I really viewed this legislation as how it was going to affect me. So there was all sorts of legislation that affected or that benefited corporations or individuals or groups that were well connected, as opposed to legislation that affected everyone equally. And I vetoed that stuff. I vetoed stuff that was going to affect my life in a bad way. I mean, you know, these construction zone, quadruple the fines for construction zones. Well, you know, I don't know about you, but when I drive through a construction zone, if there's construction going on, yeah, certainly you obey the speed limit. But it's 2 o'clock in the morning, they still have the signs up, they're saying that they're going to quadruple the fines, and it's 45 miles an hour. Well, I'm going 70, I want to drive through it at 70 miles an hour, and I don't want to sign a bill that's going to make me have to quadruple those fines. And you know that legislators will legislate anything in the name of health and safety and for our children. Legislators will legislate anything. A young guy hurts his head pole vaulting in northern New Mexico. Well, the next thing you know, I have a bill on my desk making helmets for pole vaulters mandatory. I vetoed that bill. I pole vaulted in high school. I just thought that that should be a choice, and I didn't want to wear a helmet pole vaulting. The favorite bill, and of all these bills that I vetoed, a third of the legislature was Republican. A third of the bills I vetoed were Republican bills. Because Republicans grew government just like Democrats grew government, and I vetoed those kinds of bills. Only 2 of the bills were overridden, so it ended up making a really big difference in New Mexico. It was billions of dollars of spending that didn't happen, that would have happened, but for my signature. The favorite bill that I vetoed was a Republican bill that, but for my signature, it would have been law in New Mexico. It was a dog and cat exercise bill. It was a Republican bill. It required pet stores to exercise their dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. You know, if I would have signed, and I think that's a great idea. I think that's where I would like to buy my dogs and cats, is in a store that advertises we exercise our dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. But if I would have signed that bill, the next thing I would have had to have done was funded the dog and cat exercise police. Another thing that I was known for nationally is I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice. I really believe in free markets, and I think you either believe in free markets or you don't believe in free markets. But I believe in them. So the notion of educational entrepreneurs delivering better products and better services to education K through 12 is a really exciting notion to me. I suggest that higher education is simply a form of school choice. You all choose to be here, going to school. You make that selection based on the dollars that you're spending, and I think we have the best, highest educational system in the world. I don't know why we can't apply those same principles to K through 12. So for 6 years in New Mexico, I proposed that every single student in the state of New Mexico get a school voucher. Would have brought competition to public education, in my opinion, dramatic improvement to public education. But the third thing that I got known for nationally, and this was in keeping with a promise that I made when I ran for governor, which was what are we spending and what are we getting, and that there wasn't going to be any issue that I wasn't going to put on the front burner that needed to be put there. So I wanted to take a really hard look at the war on drugs in this country, and I wanted to include legalization as a potential alternative to what we were doing. Now I came at this from the standpoint that half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend on the courts, and half of what we spend on the prisons is drug-related. And what are we getting for that? Well, we're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. I always point out that's the population of New Mexico that gets arrested in this country every single year. And we now have 2.3 million people behind bars. That's the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. We do. I mean, we're talking Zimbabwe, we're talking Cuba. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, 2.3 million people. So I wanted to look at the issue of drugs. And at the time, this was 1999, the government said Holland, which has effectively decriminalized all drug use, I needed to start with Holland, because if they had effectively decriminalized all drugs, I better find out why we should do that in lieu of the fact that, according to the government, Holland had skyrocketing drug use, and they also had crime that was out the roof, and that had to do with the fact that Holland had effectively decriminalized drugs. Well, in looking at it for a very short amount of time, and just looking at the issue for a very short amount of time, realized that Holland has 60% the drug use as that of the United States. Now that's on a per capita basis, but that's kids, that's adults, that's marijuana, and that's hard drugs. So that kind of went out the window. And Portugal, 10 years ago, decriminalized all drug use. Over the last 10 years, Portugal has shown a decrease in heroin use of 50% over the last 10 years, and they have decriminalized the use of all drugs. So that kind of went out the window. And then I guess I needed to look at whether marijuana was a gateway drug or not. And I've smoked marijuana, and to me there was just nothing that was gateway about marijuana leading to harder drugs. But I guess I needed to check out if that was really the case. And there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that marijuana is a gateway drug. It doesn't exist. And in fact, the government itself conducted a study that conclusively showed that it was not a gateway drug. But if there is a gateway notion to marijuana, it's that the person that sells marijuana might also sell other drugs, harder drugs, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, LSD, whatever it might be. So what's a more likely scenario? That a young person is going to have more access to drugs by legalizing marijuana, where they have to produce a card to buy the marijuana, or a situation where it's a black market situation, and again, you get exposed to harder drugs. So after examining the issue for a fairly short amount of time, I came to the conclusion that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related. And that's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. So I advocated then in 1999, and I still do today, let's legalize marijuana. And when you say legalize marijuana, it's never going to be legal for kids to smoke pot. It's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car, become impaired, do harm to others. That's never going to happen. And when it comes to all the other drugs, I advocate harm reduction strategies. Reducing death, disease, crime, corruption, the things that we really care about. In a nutshell, looking at the rest of the drug problem as a health issue first, not a criminal justice problem. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke marijuana. But I've drank alcohol and I've smoked marijuana. And I will tell you, and I probably don't need to tell you, that there's a big difference between marijuana and alcohol. And the big difference is that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. England, just in the last couple of days, came out with a study that said that heroin is less damaging than alcohol. They said that ecstasy and marijuana pale in comparison to alcohol. I've always maintained that legalizing marijuana would actually lead to less overall substance abuse because people would smoke marijuana as opposed to alcohol. And when you drink alcohol, when you drink a lot of alcohol, you know, you end up doing some really stupid things that might affect other people in a bad way, whether that's violence or whether that's drinking and driving. You know, it doesn't happen on the marijuana side. I mean, too much marijuana, go to sleep, too much marijuana, too many calories get ingested. So I got out of office January 1 of 2003. I was term limited. I'm a firm believer in term limits. I think that we're well served by politicians that do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. I got out of office then. I didn't want to have a say in what was happening nationally or in the state because I had my shot and I thought that I really made the most out of that opportunity. But I find myself outraged 18 months ago over the fact that we are bankrupt in this country. That 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending is